of September 2025. I have to read first of all. There are no planned fire alarms scheduled at this time. Therefore, should the fire alarm go off, please make your way out of the building via the nearest fire exit to the car park beside the Windmill Public House. Please ensure that microphone directly in front of you is switched on and logged in. Please do not move the microphone from its set position, and when speaking, ensure the microphone is directly in front of you and not to the side or high. Thank you very much. So if we can move on to the agenda, item number 1, apologies for absence. Are there any absences, please?
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Hatch, Councillor Mills and Councillor Rock.
Thank you. Disclosure of interests. Anybody here wishes to disclose an interest in items on the agenda? Thank you. Minutes. To confirm and sign the minutes from the meeting held on the 5th of June. Do I have a proposer to accept those minutes? Unless anybody's got any issue they want to raise on them.
Sorry, Chair. You think I'd know this by now. The only thing I'd say is that I wasn't here for that last meeting, so I won't vote on this. It's not that I object. It's just purely I wasn't at that meeting.
Thank you for raising that. Any other? Councillor Curtis.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Shendon. This issue of approving or otherwise minutes at a meeting at which one is not present was raised previously, and you are allowed to approve minutes at meetings at which you are not attending, which seems bizarre, but that was the ruling by the monitoring officer.
May I check on the veracity of that? Yeah. Okay. So, Councillor Shenton, you may vote, if you so wish. Okay, so having got that matter of protocol sorted, would somebody like to propose accepting the minutes? Thank you, Councillor Curtis. Somebody to second? Thank you. And do we approve of those minutes? Agreed. Thank you very much. So we now move on to item 4, minutes of the subcommittee. To note the minutes, the licensing panels held on the 25th of June and the 23rd of July 2025. Do we note those minutes? Thank you. Public participation, questions from the public. Are there any questions? No questions, thank you. Questions from councillors. Are there any questions logged from councillors? No, thank you. Therefore, we can now move to item number 7, enforcement update from Claire Agnon, enforcement team leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a regular report, so you should be familiar with the format now of these reports. On page 11, it has a summary of the cases received per year. On page 9, and you'll note that in the report it does suggest that the number of cases this year is likely to exceed 600, going on the numbers received so far. Page 11 has a breakdown of the historic cases, with the oldest case now being 2019. And whilst officers are reviewing all the new cases that are coming through, we're also continuously reviewing the older historic cases for potential action or closure. So it's continuously under review, the old cases as well. Paragraph 1.3.6 refers to the local enforcement plan review. So the majority of the members here today attended a workshop on the 4th of August, and that was one of the initial stages of the local enforcement plan review. At the moment, there's been no further consultation arising from that workshop. However, it is proposed that a consultation be carried out with councillors initially on the prioritisation of cases table that was discussed. And I just showed the coloured diagram that the focus group spent some time debating. What I'm proposing to do is to collate the comments that were made during that workshop and then send a revised version out for consultation with the potential to have a further workshop before we do a public consultation exercise. So I'm not proposing to discuss the local enforcement plan in any further detail today to allow that process to take place. Page 11 also refers to formal action taken, so you'll see the table showing the number of notices served per quarter, with a further update on page 12. Since the report was produced, it refers to the enforcement notices being issued and how many have been appealed. Since the report was produced, there has been an appeal against the latest enforcement notice. So the table that's on page 14 will need to be amended to include an appeal against an enforcement notice for a site known as Burnside Shottery. Some members may be familiar with the site already. We don't have a start date yet for that, but we have received the appeal forms. In terms of enforcement appeal decisions, so again, page 12, since the last committee, there have been a number of appeal decisions. They've been mixed, some have been allowed, some have been dismissed. And I did go through some of those appeal decisions as part of the member training session that you had in July, but there have been subsequent appeals since. You'll also see from the agenda that the Planning Inspectorate have finally given some dates for appeal site visits on some of the older notices, 2 of which were issued in 2023. So those site visits took place on the 15th of September this week, so the decisions are imminent. One of the 3 site visits, the one for the Lays, that site visit was cancelled by the inspector, so that needs to be rearranged. Link to the appeal decisions on page 15, it refers to an application for judicial review. That related to an enforcement notice that has now been quashed on appeal for the English barn. So that court hearing has now been vacated. And the applicant has the right now to have the application determined, so that will go through the normal application process. So there's no further information to provide at this meeting, so the recommendation is that the report be noted. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Wally-Hoggins.
Yes, this arose because my area, as you know, Claire, is very rural, and there's an enforcement sort of notice come through, or there's going to be an inspection over in my neck of the woods in a very rural area. And one of the questions that I asked of the officer is, do we have any drones that we use within the department for looking at, because a lot of the rural, where these escarpments are, it means that a lot of building work can be masked. And other surrounding authorities do have the use of drones so that they can just take it up in the air and see exactly what's going on. How far is this, is Stratford District Council away from obtaining drones? Because it's a matter of working smarter rather than working harder. And actually, I think drone technology would actually help quite considerably in probably rooting out quite a bit of work that's been going on under the radar. Thank you.
I am aware of other organisations that use drones as well. The Environment Agency use them. In terms of enforcement and the council use, well, any use, you have to comply with RIPA. So there are difficulties with that, which is why councils have resisted it previously, including ourselves. I'm happy to review with legal. I can see Henry nodding his head. So again, there could be opportunities for other departments to consider it, but we would need to get legal advice on the RIPA implications if that is something that the committee wants further consideration of.
I think that we should be looking at that, because we have quite a sizable budget for planning, etc. I think that there are other departments within the council that this could be made use of. I certainly think we need to be more progressive in what we're doing. We're looking at artificial intelligence anyway. This really could be a real game changer for our officers and for the work that we undertake here, because I, for one, think we should sometimes be proactive rather than reactive with some areas. I look at this list here and I can see, how did it come to pass that an entire swimming pool with enclosure and buildings managed to get completely erected before we actually intervened here. And I do think that we could hide behind lots of things or say it's too difficult because of X, Y, and Z. But if other authorities, Oxfordshire, are using them, that borders my patch. If they're using it, certainly I would have thought the Cotswold District are using it as well. You know, as I said, it's about working smarter. Let's not put obstacles in the way. Let's try and get rid of those obstacles and embrace the technology that we have available. We seem to be using, we need to do this, in my opinion. If other agencies are embracing them, then I'm quite sure that a lowly district council can do exactly that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Petrovic.
Thank you, Claire. My question is, I think you just kind of glanced over that, Section 1.7 and Section 106 enforcement cases. As you know, we have the working of the Task and Finish Group on private management companies, which commenced last month. And yesterday we had a very interesting meeting where a lot of things transpired in relation to some of these cases. So two questions really. First one was around the capacity of the officer working on that. I know we have one FD, but the number of cases has significantly increased, as it's mentioned in the report, and we expect it might go up further. So do you think that there is a need for additional officer to deal with the number of cases that we have on S106 enforcement? And the second question is specifically around some of the policy guidance, I guess, that also transpired from the meeting yesterday on one of particular estate where the developers have been, or so management company have been actually selling pieces of the POS to, well, different people. And the reason why we've not raised an enforcement case, and that was because it was deemed that it's not in public, or it doesn't cause any public harm. And I was just wondering whether you can elaborate on why that was deemed to be not causing public harm, because I think a lot of the members in the room yesterday were very shocked that that's not something that we would consider enforcing on. Thank you.
If I answer the last question first, I won't mention what site it is because there has been a previous enforcement case relating to the site. The case was raised in February this year, and it was against the sale of public open space to individual landowners. That is not a breach of planning control. There's an old historic Section 106 agreement as far as officers were concerned at the time. When they looked at it in February, there was no breach of planning. So it wasn't that there was an assessment that there wasn't any harm, it's that there wasn't a breach of planning control to investigate. So that's why there wasn't any further investigation. It was actually declined to investigate, and a number of officers concurred with that view at the time.
So if I may, so just be clear, so land ownership is not planning matter, fundamentally. So the fact that the ownership's been transferred to someone else, as long as the use is the same and it's still used as a public owned space, then it doesn't matter who owns it fundamentally. And that's why it's not a planning enforcement issue. If they start to enclose it or do things to it, then that may become a planning enforcement issue. But the fact that it's simply been transferred in ownership is not a planning matter.
Petrovic again.
Follow up on that. So in terms of the management fees then, I don't know whether that kind of falls into a separate scope. Surely that would have an impact on who is actually paying and to whom.
Well, they would just transfer to the new owner, and in the same way that you know, if you own a property, you rent it out, your tenants change. It's a contractual matter. It's not a planning matter, providing the use of the land that hasn't changed. Then it says the planning doesn't come into it.
Okay, and just lastly, is that something then that wouldn't be in the scope of, obviously we have our new Section L of the SPD that we would be able to put as part of S106 conditions?
It's something that, as part of the Task and Finish group, that they're now looking at what can be within Section 106 agreements. It's just that it wasn't in this particular one. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's something that we would very much want to look at. But on the capacity side, would you be able to provide the assessment?
If I answer the first question then, which was about the resources. So Alison Willers, who's sat in the audience, is one of our senior planners who's dealing with the Section 106 work at the moment. We did have funding for 2 temporary posts. We have advertised for senior planner posts now on 2 occasions and not had any applicants internally or externally. That would have also allowed this post to have been filled had there been applicants at the time. We're currently looking at opportunities to see whether or not the posts can be enhanced through a market supplement to make it more attractive, and we're currently going through that process at the moment. And that's all we can say at this stage. But there is funding for the second post, and the second post is needed, bearing in mind that Alison's work has already doubled since starting in May.
And do we have a timeline for the enhancement of the post and when that might be going out back to?
I don't. It's internal processes, and I've shivered along colleagues appropriately.
Councillor Shenton.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points I wanted to raise. Just coming back to the public open space issue, I think from the Conservative side, we share the concern over the fact that it's been transferred possibly into private hands. And the comment I think that does concern me as well is that should that happen and should they start to do things with the land, John said may be a planning issue. I would say that can you say why it would only be may rather than why it will be a planning issue? I'm just slightly concerned by that comment.
I think
I'll come to the second question.
Yeah. I think we can't speculate on what a landowner may or may not do with land at the moment. If, in the event that any domestic use of the land occurs, so it's perhaps incorporated into a garden, that might involve a change of use, but every case is assessed on its own merits. It's a matter of fact and degree as to how they're using that land, whether or not it may involve a change of use, which is why probably John said may.
If I might just come back on that then. So we're saying it, I come back to the same question almost, you know, that you're saying if it became residential land, garden land, it may. Surely it wouldn't be public open space if it's garden land, and so that should be, we will investigate.
It's not always clear-cut on whether something is being used as garden land, so that's why we would have to decide if there is enough evidence to indicate that it is being, and then we would investigate to see if we can establish that there has been a change of use.
Thanks for that. As I say, we share the same concerns that Councillor Petrovich has raised. The other thing I wanted to just bring up was that last year we talked about, this time last year, we talked about decline to investigate. And when we look at the numbers, the number of cases that you've received in the year, they look fairly consistent at around 600 plus, if you like. But how many of those in the last year, or how many of your current, if you've got that number, how many of the current, first of all, do these numbers include DTIs? And if so, how many are declined to investigate? So we get a clear picture of actually what the workload is rather than a gross figure.
At the workshop, which I think you sent your apologies for, I did explain that the decline to investigate, it wasn't a reliable source of information, so that's why it was agreed that we wouldn't do any further research on that particular matter. I'm happy that moving forward, we're very clear in terms of officers' interpretation of when something should be recorded as a decline to investigate, so I don't see any need to re-look at what we've done historically. I'm just satisfied now that we are recording things. I can provide that information on subsequent reports, but I'm not sure how much of it would assist at this stage.
So if we look at this logically, The numbers that we're seeing here, it's a yes or a no, I suppose. Do they include ones that you would subsequently say are DTIs rather than the ones you are actually investigating?
There will be some decline to investigate, but some of the historic ones that were recorded as decline to investigate were actually investigated, which is why I'm worried that there's been some misreporting, and that's why we've not done any further work on that particular category.
Councillor. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chairman. I was struck by your response to the question about the use of drones, that you were quite aware of them, used by other authorities in some circumstances. Your responsibility is to prosecute the enforcement function, and I presume you use whatever methods you think appropriate in particular cases. A couple of questions then. Has your work suffered? Do you feel for the lack of having chosen not to use drones? Would you regard budget constraint as a reason why you haven't used drones? And would you not regard it as an operational decision as to whether and in what circumstances drones are used? I.e., it's not a matter for the regulatory committee to tell you how to do your job.
Through you, Chair. I'm aware of the Environment Agency using them, and they have used them for some sites that we've jointly investigated. I've not been involved in any discussions with other local planning authorities from an planning enforcement point of view, so it's interesting what Councillor Sarah Woolley-Huggins had to say on that. I'm not sure how it would assist some of the enforcement cases that we've had. We always make sure that we do have access into sites. We've not been denied access apart from one site, which we then did get into the site eventually. So we will often seek to obtain a warrant if we're not allowed into a site voluntarily. Again, I don't think the budget issue has put me off. It's been more the RIPA implications.
My last question was, is it the role of the regulatory committee to make operational decisions on your behalf?
Well, the short answer to that is no, Councillor. But I think it's, having said that, it's always useful to have a steer from members as to direction of travel. The department has used drones in terms of the South Yorkshire local plan and looking at some of the new sites coming forward. As I say, there are some legal issues we need to resolve, and I think, you know, if this council starts to use it on a regular basis, it's from a corporate perspective, and colleagues in other departments, we need to think about that. I think that the key point, though, as Ms. Hines said, that what are we using the drones for? If it's simply to look at an existing site, well, is it much more efficient than going out on site? You still have to go there and set the drone up. You know, if you're there on site, you might as well access it. What I think we can't do, and this may have been the illusion, is start patrolling the district with drones to spot breaches of planning control. That is not practical. So, you know, I think, yes, we can use technology, and as a council we are moving into that arena. We're looking at AI, and so I think we'll start to see more use, but we need to make sure we satisfy all the legal requirements, and so I don't think our work has suffered from not using drones to date, and we also be mindful of what we're using them for.
Thank you. May I ask Councillor Curtis, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just a little bit of clarification, if we can, Claire. Just looking at 171 and 172, the new temporary senior planner post was filled at the end of May. Is that Alison moving into that post?
Yes,
it is?
It is, on a temporary basis.
On a temporary basis. Thank you. Has her previous post been backfilled?
It has.
It has. Okay. So, just reminding the committee really that as part of the budget process for the current year, it came to budget review panel meeting that the additional resources were required for enforcement. And at the budget review panel meeting, then confirmed at council in February, it was agreed that a sum of £250,000 was going to be allocated to strengthen enforcement. So we're now in September, and it would appear that what has happened is that there's been an internal appointment to one of those temporary posts, but that's all that's happened, although £250,000 was allocated in the budget specifically to deal with the Section 106 backlog. And I do recall in the autumn at the budget review panel meetings, it was suggested that there was a degree of urgency to tackle this backlog, which is why it was agreed, not in fact to appoint two temporary posts, but the sum was there to get the job done. So I think the committee would like to know, given the resource that was made available, why, and I appreciate that recruitment can be challenging across the piece in local authorities, and particularly at the moment. But I think the committee would have liked to have seen more progress than seems apparent.
Okay, we did discuss, I think, this in detail in the closed session last time. I think so. I'm conscious of not discussing internal matters in public session, but the fact is we had a resource, we've given a resource for additional resources on 106 matters. We've appointed one officer to that, and that work is progressing. I think we just have to be mindful of the challenges with recruitment and how difficult it is to find staff that are able and willing to do the job and getting the right staff. It's not just a case of getting a bum on a seat, as it were. We've got to get experienced, qualified professional staff to do the work, which we have with Ms. Willers. I hear the frustration of members in terms of the fact we've only got the one post filled. We are looking at that, as Ms. Inans said previously. Recruitment has been particularly challenging for enforcement. It's become very challenging for planning more generally. It's always been challenging for recruitment, for enforcement. So, yeah, we need to progress it, and we are progressing it. But I can have all the resource in the world, but if the people are not there, I can't fill those posts, and that's what appears to be the situation at the moment.
Do you want to follow that, Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. If I may. I get, and I think we all in this room understand that recruitment to local authorities is challenging. But I just wonder how active, given this is a real issue across the district, and I think the enforcement of Section 106 agreements is something that I would think probably all members have in their inbox. And it really is a problem for residents. How much activity since it was agreed in February has there been to really go out and to try to recruit officers to these posts? Basically, has there been a sense of urgency in this recruitment drive?
We have done 2 rounds of recruitment for senior planner posts, and we've not had any applicants.
But when were those?
I don't have the exact dates to mind. One was certainly April, and then more recently in June.
Councillor Wally Hoggins.
Yes, it's just a note of clarity, really. I was not making operational decisions, as has been inferred during this meeting, regarding drone technology. I was merely inquiring if it was something else that we should be considering. I note that Councillor Petrovic, the notes that you made regarding is it a garden, is it a public open space, again, could have used this space. And it would be useful, I think, to have some sort of report as to how it's been, you know, whether or not we, you know, how that might be of use. And I'm pretty sure that there will be a raft of applicants for being drone operators for Stratford District Council. I don't think you'd have any trouble whatsoever. In fact, you could probably get the chap that took it upon himself to hover a drone over our house a couple of weekends ago. So, but it is, you know, I wouldn't presume to do that, and I'm sure that officers realise that. But it is a question of, you know, should we be embracing this technology and looking at what other authorities are doing? It's good to stay apace rather than be on the back foot. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hardy.
Yes, just following up on Councillor Curtis's point, I think he asked where these advertisements have been placed and how often and how many applicants have we actually had.
The first round in April went in a normal planning publication that we use, which is qualified planners would look at that publication. The second time we went into more than one planning publication, so we spent twice the budget that we use for advertising, and we had 0 internal or external applicants on both instances.
Did you do LinkedIn?
I'm not aware of the council's policy for using LinkedIn on job adverts.
I think it does. So I'm on LinkedIn and I do share. There's a HR LinkedIn page, if page is the right word. So yeah, any vacancy is shared on LinkedIn. But I think the reality is that recruitment has a cost associated to it, both in terms of you know, advertisements and that, and the officer time in getting those sorted. So yeah, and I think we have to be realistic of, if you keep going out and out and out, are you going to just waste money? So it's about thinking about how you target your recruitment. And say we've gone to the professional planning magazines and professional places to do that. And I think it's just seeing where else we can target that, and whether there's any recruitment agencies can help in that process. But say that there is a cost associated with that.
Councillor Curtis.
Obviously there is a cost to recruitment, and sometimes it can be significant. But I think we've allocated £250,000 to get this work done. If additional recruitment costs are incurred to get that done, then I think that's a reasonable use of some of that resource. And I think, again, at Cabinet last week, I did emphasise that this council is well resourced at the moment, but we are time short. You know, this council has, well, it's less than 18 or about 18 months till the shadow elections. There really is a sense of urgency to get this work done. If additional costs in terms of recruitment are required, then I think it could be met either out of the £250,000 that's been already allocated, or it could be another request for additional funding. I don't think the cost of recruitment should get in the way of really actively trying to fill these posts. Though, John, I do accept, you know, there aren't necessarily the people there.
If I could just come in, I don't think it's the cost of recruitment that's the issue, it's the salary that we are offering for those posts, in that external consultants provide a much higher salary for possibly to do less work.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Petrovic, please?
I wasn't actually going to go down this route, but given that, you know, we have these delays and we don't actually know, there are people out there who are ever going to apply for this post. I was just wondering if you have looked at what other councils are doing in terms of using AI to speed up some of the planning applications, as well as reviewing some of the planning documents, because I think that there are a few councils that are already trialing it. I know the implementation of any kind of technological solution takes a long time, but we are where we are. So I was just wondering whether that's something that you have been looking at.
To be honest, it's not something I've been looked at or that's been raised previously. We do have an AI policy on how we use it for operational matters, so happy to explore if there's any benefits.
Yeah, so I think that's not just the co-pilot that we all have the policy for, it's specific planning tools.
Yes, and certainly that's something the government are encouraging councils to go down. We've certainly looked at it in terms of the local plan. We haven't done so in terms of enforcement or applications. And as I say, as the products develop, then I think there's a real opportunity there, particularly given the recruitment crisis we're now in with planning professionals. So I think it's a case of watch this space, but I don't think it's going to give us a short-term solution. And a lot of the things with enforcement is you've got to go outside, and I think there's limitations about what AI might be able to achieve on that front, but whether it can pick up other things and then we can move people around, then that's what we can look at.
Thank you. That's quite a detailed discussion, and I think there are some points in there that we shall want reporting back on fairly rapidly, because I think these issues have been raised before this meeting, so we need to have replies on those. Thank you. Are there any other comments to make on item 7 before? Yeah, Councillor Harding.
Sorry, just a brief one. Just looking at this table on top of 11, 3 cases open from 2019. That seems pretty extraordinary. Is there any danger that these might be closed off before too long?
Normally I make a note as to which those cases are, but I haven't for this particular one, so just bear with me, I'll see if it's... Yeah, sorry, I don't have the details, but they are ones where we've served enforcement notices or other types of notices and we're waiting for compliance. I think it's one of them. There is another one where possibly there's been an ombudsman decision, so we're waiting for that. I can give further details at the next committee, but as I say, we're continuously reviewing all the older cases to make sure because previously you'll remember that there were some cases going back to 2016, so 2019 is actually fairly recent in our book, so yeah.
Thank you. May I ask if there are any more observations or questions before we move on to item 8 on the agenda? No. Councillor Petrovic.
Do we monitor how many planning enforcement complaints we get?
The report explains how many enforcement complaints we receive.
So, but from the public, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can we now move on to agenda item 8 on the thank you. Can I ask Henry Biddington, Environmental Health and Licensing Manager, for his report?
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, committee. So I've submitted my report. This gives an update to the Regulatory Committee on the activities within the environmental health and licensing teams. And as per my last report, it will give an update on our service plan progress from Q1. I appreciate we're a little bit behind because we're nearly finished Q2, but this is how we will rotate as we go along. So, start with environmental health team. We have as you can see from our food safety, we continue to have a very high rate of compliant under the food hygiene rating scheme. We continue to have a very high rate of very good premises, which are rated 5 or above. So as you're probably aware, we inspect food businesses and they get a rating of between 5 and 0. So of the 1,154, we have 84% are rated 5 or above, which is very good. I can't be above, so 5, which is very good. And actually is, from a local authority point of view, that is an excellent rate of compliance, which is credit to both our food business operators who or across the board want to comply and want to be as good as they can be, and to my officers who go out and carry out the inspections and ensure that they are meeting those that level of compliance. We've had one additional approved premises over the last quarter, which is an egg packing plant. I'll move on to some health and safety work we've been doing. So the environmental health team continue to facilitate and chair monthly SAG safety advisory groups where we advise event organisers on safety. We also hosted a county-wide safety advisory group meeting for the Tour of Britain, which took place in September, a couple of weeks ago. Was it last week? Went across the district. So we hosted that for the county. We are currently investigating 2 major accidents, which I won't be able to go into details with for obvious reasons, but just to be aware that has taken up a large amount of our officer time when we have to react to obviously tragic circumstances of these types of accidents. And we've also, we continue with our routine food hygiene inspections, but actually sometimes that identifies other things, such as we had an inspection where we identified an unsafe gas installation in the commercial premises where we had to, they had to have the gas turned off, but that was only because our officers have been out there and have the health and safety knowledge to identify these issues. Moving over to our environmental protection team, so we've submitted our annual status report in relation to air quality. So that looks at the levels of air quality within our 2 designated air quality management areas, one within Stratford and one within Studley. We have seen continuous improvements over the last 7 or 8 years of nitrogen dioxide levels, which is what the air quality management areas put in place. And following DEFRA's recommendations, we've put in a report which is due to go to Cabinet in October to revoke our air quality management areas, which gives us then the ability to have a district-wide air quality strategy. So that report is going into Cabinet in October, which gives us a bit more ability to tackle district-wide air quality issues rather than just concentrating on the 2 areas which currently are air quality management areas. We continue with our work around private water supplies and sampling and following up on failures. Our licensing team, again, we've had a busy summer. We are currently reviewing our licensing policy, and that's just been out for consultation. So that policy is due to expire in January. So we've drafted a new policy in line with colleagues across Coventry and Warwickshire. That was out for consultation, and that will be going to Cabinet in November for approval. We continue to investigate complaints and issues around our taxi licensing trade. Although again, I would say that the majority of our taxi drivers, our licensed drivers, are very good and comply with what we want them to do. But obviously there is, if we do identify issues, we take action. And there's a link there and a link in the minutes of our licensing panel to a taxi driver who was suspended for 12 weeks following failure to report convictions. Again, you can see those in the subcommittee. And the next part of the report looks at our service plan from 25-26. So I think when I first came into post, we were kind of asked to look at how we were performance in relation to our environment, health and licensing teams, and how I could present that to the committee. So we used our service plan, which we presented to the last committee. So the key performance indicators are reported to overview and scrutiny alongside the rest of the key performance indicators for the council. Our two of ours are annual. The one looks at planned programme of food inspections. Our target's 95% of them completed. We actually, on paper, completed 90%, although there is some variations in those. 90% with the additional work that we've had come in relation to reactive work, etc., is a good, well, I think we're not far off where we need to be, and we'll catch that up for the next quarter. Percentage of licensed applications has reached 100%, so we're well on target with that. The service-specific performance indicators were what we put together to kind of monitor internally of what we're doing. So as you can see with that, so with our response to planning applications, that's quite a lot lower than our target. Although the majority of applications were responded to, they weren't necessarily responded to within the consultation time frame. And that's much of do of the backlog and resourcing issues, but we have additional resources coming to the team in June. So we've actually got another experienced environmental health officer who's got a lot of experience in planning applications. So we're hoping to see that figure increase over the next quarter, which obviously helps to speed up the planning process. I would say that we have as well, you've probably from our planning colleagues aware that we have seen an increase in planning applications, so that has a knock-on effect onto my team and our ability to respond to consultations. The rest of those are compliant apart from the response to service requests, which is a little bit under where we'd want it to be, although we did have respond to 856 service requests, which is quite a high number. We're also looking at our database, data management system reports on that, so there is some slight tweaking around our reporting. So over the next few quarters, I think we'll identify a better trend of that and whether we're actually accurately reporting. But this gives us a good idea of where we're at. And then the final part talks about where the priorities we have on the council plan, all of which we are ongoing and progressing to a satisfactory degree, so that all of our actions are being actioned, if that makes sense. And as I said, I've already mentioned the review of the licensing policy, which is due for November Cabinet, the air quality report, which is due for October Cabinet, and we have a webinar, or a parish council webinar next week, in relation to the event process. So that's the end of my report, Chair.
Thank you very much for the report. Do I have any questions? Councillor Whalley-Hoggins.
Yes, I'd like to thank you, Henry, for a very full and comprehensive report. I think the use of key performance indicators here for us is excellent. I also think that looking at the council plan and the actions and progress against that is also incredibly useful for this committee. Do you think that drone technology is something that your department could use, please? Forgive me for droning on.
I think it's something we could explore. Again, I think from previous experience, from an enforcement point of view, it's extremely difficult to use drone technology. I do think it will have its place, but you can't film somebody without their permission and then take enforcement action against them without a ripper. So it is, from an enforcement point of view, incredibly difficult for us to use it. I think there probably is times we could use it, but whether it's, I don't know, we'd have to look into whether it's cost effective to have our own drone or actually more cost effective to employ somebody else to use a drone. That might be a better way of doing things, but indeed, something we could look into.
Yeah, the follow-up question is that last year we had the SANC meetings for the Christmas fairs that we were having in Stratford. Christmas, what is it? Christmas market. Yes, the Christmas market. Are we having those ongoing for this Christmas?
Yes, the Christmas market will be coming to a safety advisory group meeting soon. Yeah.
Councillor Curtis.
Thanks, Chair. Henry, thanks.
Councillor, could you put your...
Sorry, my apologies. Looking at the food safety, I think that's fantastic. You know, we are a district that relies so much on tourism, and so, you know, many thanks to the team for ensuring that those inspections are undertaken. Two questions. One, for private water supplies. The two that came back with failures, are those supplies now closed until they comply, or what other action is taken? And I was just thinking, on the performance indicators, the first one, the responding to planning applications within the consultation time frame, what the time frame is for that. So it's not quite, and I think, yeah, the update for the licensing policies, I'm really pleased that that's going to be coming to the November Cabinet, because I think at licensing panel, we have sometimes felt that the policies really are rather outdated and do need some updating. Yeah.
To come back to you, Councillor Curtis, thank you for the comments. The private water supplies, it depends what the failures are and how severe they are and what the supply is. But yes, we have got one at the moment where they're being very strongly advised not to drink the water. It is their own water and they do have a choice whether or not to drink it. But yeah, yeah, quite. Unless there's a very serious public health risk and it's affecting more than one property, in which case we do have powers. But yeah, the second question, timeframes on planning consultation. Generally, we get, there's about 21 days, but it can be a bit longer and can be a bit shorter. It depends on the size of the application, so I can't put a date. Yeah. We look normally about 21 days. We normally get them after 5 or 6 days of consultation by the time it gets turned around, so we're already a little bit behind on that. So that's something else we're working on. But yes, it's been generally about 21 days. And the third...
It was my other point, sorry, Chair.
Oh, the licensing
was just a comment that I'm pleased that's coming to Cabinet.
So the licensing policy, which is coming to November Cabinet, is for the licensing acts, so premises licence, things like that. The taxi policy, which is probably more what you're referring to within panel, will be coming in the new year.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I won't repeat the compliment about the quality of the report. I think 3 times would be egging the pudding a bit too much, but it's genuine nevertheless. Paragraph 1.2.3, environmental protection. I think the personal opinion, the proposal to enlarge the area covered by the survey to being the whole district is the right move. It makes more sense. It will be much more useful. My question is, this council, over the past 2-3 years, since the climate emergency was declared, has taken a number of initiatives to make changes, either to put solar panels in or plant trees or do a number of other things. Is there any way in which the impact of those decisions and those initiatives can be reflected in the air quality report, so that there is some sort of measure of cost benefit? Is that whistling for the moon? That's my first question.
Thank you, Councillor. I think there's probably a differentiation between climate change and air quality, first of all. So obviously the things that cause air quality or poor air quality generally are climate change emissions, but not always. So things like carbon dioxide isn't necessarily measurable within air quality. So that's probably my first thought process. So marrying the two up, I think, probably is very difficult to demonstrate that climate changes have had an impact on air quality. I think would be quite difficult to do, and I'm not sure whether we've got the tools or ability to do so.
Thank you. Second question, Chair. Key performance indicator, the first one, I was struck by the contrast between environmental health performance and enforcement, where the question of workload and new officers starting. Clearly, from what we've heard, enforcement have a great difficulty because of the supply of potential people and the reward package given competition from the private sector is such. In your instance, the message I get is the workload went up, we decided to do something about it, we did it, and we got somebody. Given that you acted through, given that you acted through the same HR department as the recruitment function, do I take it then that the market for, were you just lucky, or is the market for environmental health officers as difficult as it is for planning officers?
Yeah, I'm not going to, yeah, I think my answer to that is I think we work as hard as our planning colleagues to try and recruit people. There's a second answer to that is we were fortunate to get an officer of the calibre that we got. And I'll be honest with you, having done recruitment in other authorities, it's not every day that you would get that calibre of officer. We are not normally would be getting somebody who starts, you know, from newly qualified, and we'd be training them up to the level. We did, I would say we were fortunate to get who we got, and I am blessed with that. So that's so not that we didn't work hard for our recruitment, but yeah.
I'm sure the sun shines on the righteous.
Thank you for that very measured answer. Councillor Grocott.
Hello. Sorry. Yes, thank you. Thank you for your report. In section 1.2.2, I mean, obviously, as Councillor Wiley-Hoggins inquired, you have the safety advisory group meetings on a regular basis ahead of large events, and especially for regular events each year, such as the Christmas market. Not only do you have this, as part of the whole health and safety aspect of things, you've now, since you've been, in the last 12 months, actually put together a portal, haven't you, on the website that makes sure that people that want to put events together know exactly where to go, know where all the legislation, where all the regulations are, and obviously know the timescales for getting appropriate health and safety advice from the officers who go. So it's made it a lot easier. So when people decide in these crazy villages to start throwing themselves after rolling down hills after bits of cheese, we know how to safely advise them not to kill themselves. Have you found that? How have you found this portal for addressing health and safety issues? Have you seen any improvement on your figures for that? Also, for another question for this as well. Obviously, the District Council is the health and safety authority, aren't they? You are responsible for health and safety issues in the district. I mean, obviously, then at a high level, they go to the health and safety executive. How things such as the Christmas market, we are actually the running the event. It is our event. How do we? Because you won't let me into your sort of safety advisory groups. How do you manage the conflict of whether there is any health and safety issues there? Because obviously we are, in some ways, we could also be monitoring ourselves. Also, and moving on to section 1.2.3 while we're here, the environmental protection for the air quality. Obviously, we have two AQAMAs in place, which is in Stratford, around Birmingham Road, and obviously in Studley. Could you please confirm that? I mean, obviously, the air quality strategy will be the whole district, and that's more like a watching brief to make sure that we don't sort of air quality doesn't go down. Would you please confirm that whether this the management area will be revoked after the suitable sort of air quality strategy has actually been rolled out? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So the event portal, which has been introduced, is as much for our events team, and what it allows us to do is have a better overview of people who apply for road closures from the Borough Council, so we can provide them with that advice. If somebody wants to have an event on private land, which doesn't involve a road closure or our land, they don't necessarily need to come to us for advice. I would always recommend that they do, but they don't necessarily. So, although the event process has helped us to definitely help to advise people who want to apply for sort of road closures and to have events on our land, so it's something on the rec, etc. So in that way, it's given us a better handle of what's going on and it's been able to offer advice, and I think that's increase the quality of things like risk assessments which people are doing when they're carrying out road closures. We're not trying to stop people from doing things, but we're just trying to make sure that people are aware of what the risks are and how they can do something safely. Luckily, we don't have anybody rolling down hills chasing G's, because there's no way that that can be done safely. Anyway, the second question, yes, we are the Health and Safety Authority for certain premises within the district. As you alluded to, the Health and Safety Executive also have jurisdiction over different premises, so there is an enforcement split. Technically, if there was an issue with an event we ran as a district council, then the HSE would investigate that. We feel that as a regulatory team, we're a step away from our events team, that we can offer that advice, and that we're not going to be swayed either way to give incorrect advice. So I feel that we're impartial enough to be able to, if we feel that there's something going wrong, I'm not going to step away from it just because it's run by our authority, although the HSE technically would enforce if there was an issue. And the third question was around air quality. The monitoring, so the AQMA will be revoked before the air quality strategy goes into place. The monitoring on Birmingham Road will not be removed. So there is ongoing monitoring on Birmingham Road. We have ongoing air quality monitors, which is a fixed facility, and we also utilise what we call NOx tubes. They're tubes which sit on lampposts. They measure the level of NOx within those areas. So we're not planning on moving any of that monitoring equipment away from the Birmingham Road. So we will be able to identify if that becomes an issue again. At the moment, it's not exceeding any of the legal requirements or levels where we would need an air quality management area. But we're not. So we're not going to suddenly start ignoring our hotspots, I suppose. Although they're not really hotspots because they don't exceed. So, yeah.
Thank you. May I ask Councillor Shenton?
Thank you, Chair. Unlike Councillor Harvey, I will mention the the KPIs, because I was obviously 9 months ago when we spoke about the reports, I was asking for KPIs. So these are fantastic. So thank you very much for that. A couple of quick ones though. As far as health and safety goes, are you seeing if you think of the Christmas market in particular, and HVM and anti-terrorist measures, are the demands greater this year in the light of a more dangerous world, if you like, than previous years? Is there any great pressure to improve our HVM and anti-terrorist measures before that Christmas market, considering the volume of people that we do get coming through it? And then the second question is, back in March, the dog fouling PSPO came in, and obviously we're in the first quarter, and I wondered whether, not necessarily for this quarter, but will we be seeing any statistics of any kind on how effective the PSPO has been in terms of issuing tickets? Or am I barking up the wrong tree?
Thank you, Councillor. In regards to HVM, I'm probably not going to comment on specific events. That's dealt with through the Safety Advisory Group process. So yeah, I'll leave that at that, if that's okay. We haven't collected any statistics on the PSPO for dog control order. I can provide you with some if you'd like me to, but it's not something that's going to be necessarily forthcoming. I can tell you we haven't issued any fixed penalty notices to date.
Thank you. May I ask Councillor Petrovic, please?
Henry's answered my questions around HVM. It was a follow-up on that, but if it's easier to talk about that separately, we might just leave that.
Do any councillor want to comment further on this item on the agenda? No? Thank you. In that case, we will move, when I can find the agenda, on to Item 9, urgent business, and I believe there is no urgent business. So this brings us to the end of this meeting. Do we have the date of the next meeting, which we can give out before we end? It's not on here. Oh, it is. Sorry. The next meeting of the Regulatory Committee is scheduled to take place on Thursday, the 4th of December. So with that, this meeting comes to an end.